Welcome to Not in My Real Estate with me, National Core. Today we want to talk about a very critical aspect of real estate and construction, and that is whether do you build or do you buy a house. I mean, there's been a lot of debate, a lot of discussions out there that people talk about whether do I buy a house or do I go straight forward and build my own house? And that's the first area that you want to talk about in this podcast, and try to dissect it and make people understand really whether, when you've gotten the money already, should you build a house or should you buy a house? I've personally written so much about this topic, but it gives me joy to discuss it first in this my Not in Real Estate with myself. And the first thing I want to talk about is, sometimes when people talk about building and buying, they think there is that clear-cut difference, so that when someone asks you, which I've been asked so many times, on should I build or should I buy my own house, and they expect like a straightforward answer, like build or buy a house. The first thing I want to say is that because of the issues that have faced real estate in Kenya, people are rushing to build, and they're rushing to build thinking that it is a better option or it's an easier option. Yes, our buying houses in this country has faced a lot of challenges. I mean, people have been conned, and people still are being conned. Some people have lost a lot of money in this country. But I do not think that such an issue should be the drive as to whether you should build or you should buy a house. The problem we have in this country, and then largely with developing countries, first of all, is there is this fetish of home ownership. And that's one thing that I want to talk about. There's this fixation with people owning houses, and it's a problem that is affecting us. I mean, you can see the issue of government. The government is now into the issue of affordable housing, which again, they're looking at ownership of affordable housing. Personally disagree. I think sometimes you need to look at renting, and if you look at Article 43B, 1B of our constitutions, the right to housing is a purely of a housing issue, not an ownership issue. But a problem we have largely is, first of all, we have a problem with home ownership, and sometimes we think that homeowners are better citizens. I don't think so. And I can give you some statistics. I mean, look at Singapore. 91% of population in Singapore own houses. Yes, they are ranked 9th in the World Development Index. But check Romania, for example. 98% of Romanians own houses, and yet they are ranked 52nd. And Switzerland, that is ranked 2nd in world development, only 38% of people own houses. So sometimes we and I tend to discuss this further in the further episodes of this podcast, on really sometimes whether do you really need to own a house or should you just continue renting, because that's sometimes a debate that we need to have. But back to building and buying. Both of these options requires thorough vigilance on you as a buyer. And as I discuss it further to determine whether I need to build or buy, that is the first thing I want you to know. There is no shortcut. Yeah, because sometimes people think that, because buying has become a problem, I think building is easier. Building will present you with tears, sweat, and blood. You're going to suffer a lot in building, and I want to discuss some of those advantages and disadvantages of building and buying as well. But the bottom line I want you to take home from early enough in this podcast, in this discussion, is both of these options are going to require you to have vigilance, and serious vigilance, whether you're choosing to build a house or you're choosing to buy a house. Both options, you're going to be on your toes. That's the first thing you must really understand. You're going to be required to be on your toes in order to succeed in both options. Now, assuming you have, and I know a lot of families are grappling with this. I've got this question so many times on my inbox, on my social media handles, on phone calls. I have 8 million Kenya shillings. So, I mean, I'm toying the idea, should I build or should I buy? Look, there are three factors that I want to discuss with you that will allow you to determine whether you need to build or you need to buy. But first of all, I have a preference among these two, which I will disclose towards the end of this discussion. But whether you're supposed to build or you're supposed to buy, there are three areas that I want to talk about. Number one is location. Will help you to make that decision on whether do you build or do you buy. You have 8 million, for example. You want to buy a 3-bedroom apartment for your family. So you're toying with the idea, should you build or should you buy? Location is a key factor here. Why location? If you have 8 million, you will not build in Kilimani. You will definitely buy in Kilimani. All right? So where do you want to stay? I mean, that is the first thing you have to consider. You have 8 million and you want to get a house. Do you build or do you buy? Location is the first thing you must consider. Where do you want to stay with your family? If your idea is to stay around the city, forget about building. It's not possible because the land cost alone around the city, talk about your Kilimani or Kilieleshwa or just the immediate surrounding of the city, will not allow you to build your house. You will have to go for buy. All right. Number two is your environment, which is part of the location. What area do you want to stay in? Yeah. What amenities do you want to stay in? What schools do you want to look at? What schools are the children going to? So location is a very important factor whether you're supposed to build or buy. Because if you are the type that don't want to move outside the city, then you better consider buying. You better consider buying because the land prices around Nairobi, the suburbs of Nairobi and the surroundings of Nairobi have become so high that if you're considering about building, then you must go outside the city. So location is a key factor for you. Where do you want to stay? Do you mind traveling the distance? Can you stay in Syokimau? Can you stay in Kitengela? If your answer is yes, then location plays a good factor on whether you should build. All right. Number two is time, which is a very important thing, and I will elaborate on that. Time, your availability. Your availability. If you are the type that is so busy, if you're the type that has no time for things, please buy a house. Forget about building. Because building a house requires a lot of your time. You're going to be required to buy land, the due diligence around land, right? You're going to require to get approvals. Yeah, it will require you to go to Machakos, for example, go to Ngong, follow up on approvals. You're going to require to get your NEMA licenses, your NCA licenses, for example. It's going to require time to engage with the consultants, review drawings, appoint consultants, appoint contractors. It's going to require you to supervise the project on site, right? So time is a very important factor. So if you are the type that is too busy, forget about building. You're going to be in problems. Yeah. So time is a very important factor. So as a family, when you sit down and you're discussing whether do you build or do you buy, please ask yourselves, do you have the time to go through the process of building? Because if you don't have the time, put your money in a house, go once in a month or twice a month, whatever it is, and buy that house. Forget about building, because building is going to require you to dedicate your time. 6-8 months during the duration of constructions. You are going to be required to be here. Sometimes go to site on a daily basis. So a number of people opt for building, and sometimes they opt for building because they hear it's cheaper. And they run away from the concepts of when you're going to be engaged on site. And look, we are still a country that is work in progress, and I keep reminding people this. Our ethics is still in the deficit. All right? So if you reserve yourselves away from your construction site, you're going to build 2 houses instead of 1. I mean, it's a famous thing we say in construction. Yeah? The fundi will be building your house and building their own as well. So due diligence and vigilance and your time availability is important in this decision of where you're deciding whether to build or to buy. So if you have no time as a person, as a family, if you have no time, forget about building. That is how you end up with houses that are cracked. That's how you end up with houses that do not meet standards. because as a client, as the employer, as the person who owns the house, you had no time to go to site. Number 3 is your budget. I talk about 3 factors that help you determine whether to build or to buy. We talked about location, we talk about time. Now we talk about the budget. Now, how much do you have? I mean, that is a question you have to decide. Ask yourself whether you need to build or buy. Because there's no way you're going to build a house if your budget is, for example, 8 million, and you want to build a house where? Kileleshwa, for example. How much do you have? Can your budget accommodate buying land in those areas, first of all? Can it allow you? Right? So budget plays a very important role in this. How much do you have? How much have you saved to build or to buy? Because a big part of what the misconceptions that people have a lot of time is they think that building is cheaper. Of course, I have my own opinion, which I'll subject to you at some point. But that notion that building is invariably cheaper than buying, it's not true. Building can be expensive as well if you don't follow the procedures of that building. So your budget, how much you have, how much you want to subject to this decision of building and buying, it's important for you as a person. If you don't have enough resources to buy that 1/8 of land and then build on it, then it's better you buy, because if you buy, then you share the cost of the land on apartment. Yeah? If you have an 1/8 and it was, 15 million, and you build 15 apartments, each apartment share the value of the land. So it's invariably cheaper. Rather than if you have to buy the 1/8 yourself, 50 million, and then put another 10 million in building, so that's 25. So if you have 10 million, then you better just buy, because then you get to share the cost of land in a number of apartments. So budget is important. How much do you have for you to decide whether you want to build or buy? Budget plays a very important role in this decision making. So those are 3 important aspects that you must look at whether you're deciding, do I build or do I buy? Number 1, location. Yeah, where do you want to stay? Yeah, if your desire is to stay in certain areas, land prices are so high, straightforward will tell you to buy. Forget about building, because you won't afford the price of land. Number 2 is availability. Building requires you to have time. They're going to require you to dedicate a lot of time in the process of building. So if you don't have time, forget about building. You'll end up with houses that are cracking and you're going to lose a lot of money, so buy. Number 3 is your budget. How much do you have? All right. Now, let me go through the pros and cons of these options. And as I said, the notion that building is invariably a better option than buying, it's not true. I think let's agree on that. But up to now, it is not true. In fact, the research has shown that these two options, they come very close to each other. There is no that clear-cut advantage between one and the other. Let's look at the advantages, of building, and then the advantages of buying. Again, to just help you make that decision whether do you build or do you buy. Let's start with buying. And what are the advantages of buying a house? Look, whether it's off-plan or completed, one advantage that you have, firstly, if it's completed, is there's no risk of incompletion. Yeah, if you're buying a ready-made house, the house is there already, and you can walk in, walk out, pay your money, and then walk into your development. That's something that buying gives you. Yeah, it gives you the advantage that unless it's off-plan, which even that sometimes you'll find off-plan that is nearly complete. So there is that advantage you have of there's a complete house here. I just pay X amount, and tomorrow I own my house. Unlike building where I want to go to a hassle of 8 months. So buying gives you that option of you are dealing with a complete project, a complete thing, especially if the project is complete. Buying again is as a less headache. Yeah, it is less hassle. Buying a house is less hassle. In terms of even if I'm buying off plan, yeah, or I'm buying a completed house. If I'm buying off plan, what I have paid my 10% deposit, and then I pay the balance on milestone, whatever it is, and I just go to the site once a month. There's no headache. The headache is the developer, whoever is doing the project for you. So there is no hassle in buying. There's no a lot of vigilance. Yes, it's required that you must visit the site, but it's not as much as when you are building it yourself. So there is less hassle in buying, and that is a good advantage for you, right? Some of the disadvantages of buying, which you need to know, is especially for buying off plan, there's that risk that we talk about of you can be conned. I mean, that is something that is reality in our country, that you could lose your money. That is one of the cons of buying. You could actually lose your money. I mean, it's something that it's unfortunate, but it's happening a lot in our country, in this region, and the risk of incompletion. Outside the fact that you could lose your money to a crook developer, I mean, the delays in buying a house. Sometimes a house of 1.5 years takes 3 years, right? Those are disadvantages of buying. So if you wanted to move in after 3 years, after 1.5 years, you could take 4 years. I mean, I know projects in this town that are in their 4th years of construction, and they're still going on. So that is another disadvantage of buying. Another one, disadvantage of buying a house is you don't get to make a lot of changes. Yeah, this is someone's concept. This is decided for you. You have to stick to it. You will not make a lot of changes in terms of design. However minimal, you can change the finishes, but the size of the lounge will be the size of the lounge. You won't move it. The rigidity that comes with buying a house that is concepted by someone else is there to face you. So that's another disadvantages of buying a house. You will not be able to make a lot of changes. Even if it is off plan, the changes that most developers allow you to make are merely finishes. But if your lounge is less, if your lounge is small, your lounge is small. I don't think you will have the luxury of changing it, right? Another disadvantage of buying a house, another con of buying a house, is the risk of the structural integrity of buildings. I mean, we've seen buildings collapse. So if you go and buy this house that is complete, you don't know what was done in the foundation. Yeah, you have no idea whether the correct consultants were involved in this project. Yeah, you have no idea whether the engineer inspected the development. Unlike when you're building yourself, you will ensure the engineer comes for that inspection. So there's risk of, and it happens, guys. It happens. I've audited projects where the clients move in, you move in, and building starts cracking. Yeah, your house starts cracking, and 6 months of defect liability is long gone, and you have no idea of how to proceed. That risk comes with buying, because and the fact that we are still a country that is developing in all aspects, in our ethics, in our integrity, shortcuts are bound sometimes to happen in this real estate. And if you don't get a good developer, you can buy a building that has issues. Those are issues of the risk of buying a house. Now, what are we can go to building now. Let's go to building. And let's discuss the advantages of building a house. First of all, I think it is cheaper. Yeah, and I will talk about that later. I think you can get it if you follow the right steps of building a house. And I keep saying this to many people. Real estate is very punitive. It's absolutely punitive. You don't get away with any shortcut to real estate. However long it takes, you will pay for it. And you will not pay for it in quantum, you pay for it in full. So know that. Now, if you follow the steps, the correct steps in building a house, you can get it cheaper. That's a good advantage, yeah, because you will be able to eliminate the markup. Remember, the guy that is building for you to buy is in business, so his building is marking up and then selling for you, right? So if you can do it yourself and eliminate that aspect of markup and get it cheaper, get it at cost, if you follow the procedure. So that's one advantage of building a house, all right? Number two, which is critical, is you get to build what you want. You get to decide how your lounge will look like, how your kitchen will look like. You get to decide the spacing of how you want your house. That is one of the most critical advantages of building your own house. It is as per your design. You as a family, as a couple, you get to decide the size of your kitchen, whether you want a laundry, whether you want a pantry, whether you want all-en-suite bedrooms. You get to decide that. That luxury is not in buying, because the other side, the developer decides for you what sizes you have to operate within. So building a house allows you to custom make your house the way you want, which is one of the biggest advantages, right? And as I say, the most critical, those two are very critical advantages: the price, and then you get to model it. Now, what are some of the disadvantages of building? As I said, it is very tedious. It is absolutely tedious to build. All right? Especially if you go the shortcut way, and where you say, okay, and that's where the rent starts beating you. Where you say, let me get a fundi. Consultants are so expensive, so let me get a fundi and let's do it together. You will definitely sweat. So building a house is going to require you to roll your sleeves. It's a lot of work. As I said initially, it's a lot of work expected. Think about it. From what? Buying land? Yeah? You want to buy land, you look for land, get a lawyer, do the due diligence on that land, go through the process of transfer. You finish building, buying land, now you go to approvals, appoint an architect, do the drawings, appoint the engineer, do the drawings, get the approvals, the county approvals, the NCA approvals, appoint a contractor, then manage the project all through. You are involved. So it is tedious. It is tedious. Another disadvantage is you may end up spending more than is expected, especially if you don't involve the right professionals. So instead of spending 10 million to build, you can actually spend 15. And I've seen clients spending more money in building than buying. Yet they went to the mindset that it's going to be cheaper. If you don't follow the procedures, you will lose a lot of money in building than buying, which is a key disadvantage, right? So those I would say are the key pros and cons of both building and buying a house, which you need to understand and know as you do your research and soul search among yourselves to decide whether do you want to build or buy a house. Those are the key advantages and disadvantages of both options. As I said initially, there is no clear-cut advantage between these two things. And a lot of times when people ask you this question, should I build or should I buy, they want a straightforward answer. There is no straightforward answer. There are a lot of factors, as I said, to consider, especially the three that I mentioned, that you have to wrap your head around to decide whether should you build or should you buy a house. Very critical factors, all right? Now, this is my take. This is my advice on building and buying, and I'll say this at the risk of offending developers. But I think if you have the time, and I'm going to say this confidently, if you have the time and you can follow the procedures, and I'll mention one or two procedures on that. Building a house is better than buying. In my view, it's better than buying. And as a professional in the construction sector, I would rather build than buy any day, because I will definitely know how many bags of cement should go to substructure. I don't need someone else. I can calculate that. I can run that project within 6 months and I get my house. I will involve consultants because I know the benefit. So if you follow the procedure of just get the right consultants, pay for them, yeah. Sometimes we think that consultants are expensive, and yet if you get the proper registered, experienced consultants, will save you money on your house. So get the consultants, get a good architect, get a good quantity surveyor, get a good, if you can, good project manager to manage for your project. Is a difference now. Proper engineer, and then a qualified contractor, and just build your house. Get the licenses and build your house. You will end up with a proper house, cheaper, definitely, if you manage it properly, as I've mentioned, and you'll custom make it the way you want. So my preference is building any day. I prefer building than buying. But if you do not have the time, and for me, time is the most important thing here, and I keep mentioning it all the time. If you don't have the time, if you don't have the time to supervise your own projects, forget about building. Just go somewhere and buy a house. And I'm not saying that buying a house compared to building is a less hassle, but even on that side, and we'll talk about buying at length in the next episodes on what you need to look for when you're buying. But buying a house will not give you the same challenges as building. Building a house will require you to be on the ground most of the time. So I prefer building than buying. So if you continue to grapple with these decisions on these two options, and I know there are so much has been discussed and written about building versus buying. I think the factors that I've talked about at length should be able to guide you on whether do you build or do you buy. Because location is one of those prime things that people talk about. I've met people that says, I don't want to stay outside Nairobi. If you're the type of the person that just forget about building. Forget about building. Because our land prices have become ridiculous. Our land prices have, in the last decade or so, is ridiculously high. So if you're the type that fancy CBD and around the CBD of Nairobi, just prepare yourself to buy a house. Go to Kileleshwa, whatever it is, and just buy a house. Because you will not afford, an acre in Kileleshwa is worth 200 million, 220, right? It's quite high. So location is one of those critical things that you have to decide whether you, but if you prefer that you can go as far as Joska, your Juja, your Kitengela, your Syokimau down there, then probably you can think about building. But even that, the price of land is rising. But you cannot start about building a house. So location, once again, very key. Number 2 is time. And number 3 is your budget. How much do you have? Don't talk about, I want to build a house, I want to build it around Nairobi, and your budget is 5 million. Land alone is not that price. So those 3 factors will help you make that decision on whether should you build or should you buy. Those are the parameters you need to operate within, and look at them very critically. If you need more advice, get an expert, to just walk you through the steps of whether you build or do you buy. Understand each option from start to finish. Understand critically what is going to be expected of you when you buy and when you build, and then make an informed decision. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. Most welcome. Thank you.